Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the first edition of Atlantik-Brücke's new series, the Transatlantic Tech Dialogues. My name is David Deißner. I'm the Executive Director of Atlantik-Brücke, and I look forward to today's discussion with our distinguished speakers from both sides of the Atlantic. We are grateful for our cooperation with IBM, who are the co-host of today's event entitled Transatlantic Technology Cooperation, Where Are We Headed? Mr. Jetter, you have kindly agreed to kick off the discussion today by giving us a general overview on where you see transatlantic tech cooperation at the moment. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Firstly, let me thank Atlantik-Brücke for organizing this event on this very important and timely topic. I am particularly honored to be joined by Plöger from the Executive Board of BDI, along with Bruno, Gencarelli and Christopher Hoff, both working on the important topic of transatlantic data flows. At IBM, we are extremely committed to transatlantic cooperation. We know how important this relationship is for global order, for stability, and this especially in very difficult times. Despite the economic and geopolitical challenges that we face, we share the very same beliefs in democratic values and open markets. So it is deeply encouraging to see the EU and US working hard to rekindle their relationship, as there is much more that unites us than divides us. In our digital age, these shared values should be the basis of EU-US cooperation in technology with the common objective of building transatlantic technological excellence. Maintaining that transatlantic leadership will not only be key for the future of technology, but more specifically for how we want to use this technology. Unfortunately, we have seen from our perspective as a global company that governments' attempts to build strategic autonomy in technology often led to increasing protectionistic tendencies or calls for data sovereignty, turning legitimate concerns around supply chain resilience or data privacy and security into renewed criticism for free trade and globalization. In Europe, for example, we have seen more governments wrongly believe that measures like data localization or protectionistic procurement policies would be effective solutions to secure data in the aftermath of Schrems II ruling and the invalidation of the privacy shield. While we fully understand the legitimate safety concerns around the protection of personal data, erecting unnecessary barriers to the free flow of data between the US and Europe will only damage businesses that enable data-driven innovation, and so our ability to build more resilient digital economies. Additionally, I would go against the value of like-minded collaboration that the EU and the US relationship itself is based on. As we are honored to be in the presence of the two key negotiators of the EU-US data flows, let me take the opportunity here to reiterate IBM's commitment to data privacy and our point of view on government access to data, which we have followed long before GDPR and which I further clarified in a blog actually published coincidentally today. First of all, on jurisdiction. IBM European entities are subject of the European law and the national laws of the country where they operate, but are not subject of any US laws, including the US Cloud Act or other similar legislation. In that sense, we are no different from other European companies. IBM Germany will be subject to the same laws as a German cloud provider. Second, our customers' data belong to them, not to us. We are not in the business of collecting, controlling, and monetizing vast amount of consumer data, and we have never provided client data to any other government agency under any surveillance program involving the bulk collection of content or metadata. Nor have we ever provided client data stored outside the United States to the US government. In fact, IBM has only received one Cloud Act request involving client content in Europe. And in line with the policy I just mentioned, we declined this request. Our example shows that with strong safeguards in place, data privacy, security, and the free flow of data are not mutually exclusive. This is very important. As the EU and the US are currently working hard to find a successor to the Privacy Shield, I call on both sides to bring back legal certainty for all businesses with a new flexible and workable EU-US data transfer mechanism, and that guarantees adequate levels of data protection. And by the way, this is not a call from a US company on the European. This is equally a call from a European perspective to the United States. It's required both parties to work very hard on this topic and work together. In fact, I think data flows could be a great opportunity for the EU-US leadership, but there are also some others. Allow me to share from my business perspective on what I believe these opportunities are, what the three priorities for the EU-US digital cooperation should be. First, the recently proposed Tech and Trade Council is a great example of EU-US cooperation that we strongly in support of. Our recommendations for this new framework would be to first and foremost promote trusted global data flows, which are indispensable to thriving digital economy. Companies of all sizes must be able to move data securely across borders, to maintain operations, reach customers, and compete. And I previously talked about how we believe this can be achieved. So from that perspective, we very, very strongly believe that there is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity here if the two parties are really work together. So with that, I'd like to go to the next topic, which is the cooperation of technology in terms of research. I do believe that it has been shown and demonstrated very well that the challenges we face with coronavirus have shown us that all the issues going forward are more or less global issues, exponential in nature, and one country alone, even a continent, won't be able to solve them. So the data flow is as well very, very essential for fostering on both sides of the Atlantic, even globally, the opportunity for research to bring new products, to bring new inventions, to bring new solutions to bear. And last but not least, what I would like to highlight as well, and then I'm gonna hand back to you, is we need to educate the people how to use these technologies, how to make sure that on large platforms, when we use artificial intelligence on a foundation of data, we are capturing how to apply these technologies in a secure and a safe way. I strongly believe technology is neutral. What we as human beings make out of it, that is determining whether it's a good use or less good use. So with that, I'd like to hand back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jetter. A very passionate statement also for multilateral cooperation, which fully aligns with the mission of Atlantik-Brücke as well. Mrs. Plöger, if I may hand over to you, before we give the floor to the two gentlemen who are actually the negotiators for the new regulatory framework following Privacy Shield, I would like to ask you about the implications of transatlantic data transfer for the European economy as a whole and German businesses in particular. This has been a matter of considerable debate. It has been mentioned before, the lack of legal clarity. What's the scope of the problem? How bad is it really? And how are businesses dealing at the moment with a lack of legal certainty for data transfer?
Well, thank you, Mr. Deißner, first of all, for the invitation today to this new tech panel. And I appreciate participating and contributing to this discussion. Well, I mean, it's needless to point out in general, but especially in this round, that transatlantic relations are of great importance, both in the physical and in the digital world. I think the statistics remain impressive. In 2019, we had 47.5% of US digitally enabled trade exports and 44.8% of US digitally enabled trade imports were done with Europe. Quite an equal balance of trade, I would say, even though we had that discussion in other contexts. According to the OECD, the top global hubs for imports and exports of digital deliverable services are the United States, Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, France, and UK. So we'll really talk about a transatlantic business here. When we talk about digital deliverables, we talk about data economy. It has taken a while until Europe seemed to have understood the dimension of this topic. Now we have to speed up to keep pace with the US in this matter. A well-functioning international data economy is really of the utmost importance for German companies, and international data flows must therefore, we heard that from Martin Jetter, be guaranteed. And there's really a compelling need for reliable and solid legal basis for unhindered data transfer across the Atlantic to replace the invalidated EU-US privacy shield. The US is an important investment location and export market, as well as a provider of innovative and efficient global IT services. We really rely on the tight cooperation between these two countries and their companies. And the legal certainty is a real burden. I mean, we see that especially for SME who are refraining from even developing digital business models that rely, of course, on data transfer. And sometimes they even get the legal advice by the law firms. Don't even the safest way to to refrain from anything is that you don't even enter into any transatlantic cooperation, which of course it doesn't make sense at all. And it's difficult. You asked me for the figures. It's really difficult to underline that with certain figures because we don't, at least within the PDI, we don't have these figures. But of course, we see the spillover effects we have because people are still really, really slow in getting into this digital transformation, especially SME. We had a lot of discussions about the sensitivity of data protection with the US giants, and we are way behind. We're lacking of time, and so therefore this is really an additional burden we have here for years now. The past years have been quite stressful for the transatlantic relationship. At the same time, Europe had to learn that it has to redefine its trade relations with China as well. We still believe global trade and open markets are the way forward, but we understand that we have to reduce our dependencies and regain certain digital skills in tandem with our reliable partners worldwide. With the new Biden administration, Germany and Europe see the chance to open a new chapter for deepening trustful relationship with our American partners based on core values, not only regarding the use of data or its exchange. Take the example of artificial intelligence. Europe and the United States should work together, not against each other, to shape the future of AI in a democratic order. The broad implementation of AI can open great opportunities, but in some fields, its implementation must be observed carefully. I'm sure we walk down the same road in this matter. So let's be careful that possible regulation lowers trade barriers instead building up new ones. A strong transatlantic partnership is in particular important in terms of protecting shared ethical values. From a perspective of a person who had the pleasure to work on the EU ethical guidelines on AI, let me say a real milestone could be an EU-US agreement on minimum ethical standards for the development and application of AI solutions. And as Martin Jetter just said, I think there's much more that unites us than divides us. I really like that. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Plöger, for ending your first statement on an optimistic note. That is very good, and I'm actually following up on that by handing over to you, Deputy Assistant Secretary Hoff. how optimistic are you that actually a consensus can be reached between the DOC and the European Commission that allows transatlantic data transfer and at the same time complies with European ideas of data protection? You know, from a European perspective, for example, the FISA courts in the US are regarded as particularly problematic. FISA stands for Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, a US law that allows intelligence agencies such as the NSA, security agencies such as the FBI and others to search the data of foreign users even without a court order. And the revelations of whistleblower Edward Snowden revealed that data from Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Apple, Yahoo, and others have been collected and analyzed in this way. So still a great deal of concern here on the European side, particularly, of course, in pressure groups and data protectionists. So how far apart are we at the moment? And can we be optimistic that a consensus can be reached? Sorry, a bit of a long question, but over to you.
Well, let me start by saying thank you for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, I'll also start by saying, yes, I am optimistic. But it is, you know, I'm happy to talk about that, transatlantic data flows, privacy shield, and also this larger conversation about how the United States and European Union can work together to revitalize our transatlantic partnership. Rebuilding partnerships and alliances is certainly a Biden administration priority. And in this spirit, the United States looks forward to the upcoming US-EU summit in June, which is part of President Biden's first trip overseas, which also underscores our commitment to strong transatlantic partnerships based on shared interests and values, to Martin and Iris's point about that too. And the United States is working hand in hand with the EU on a host of issues, covering everything from global health security and the global economic recovery to climate change and enhancing digital trade cooperation. And specific to this transatlantic digital conversation, the United States remains committed to working with allies and like-minded partners like the EU to promote an open, interoperable, secure, and reliable internet and the development of new technologies in line with our shared democratic values. But in order for our growing transatlantic digital economy to continue to flourish and remain competitive in the future, we must work together to enable the cross-border data flows that underpin nearly every single part of our relationship. And in order to do that, we must restore stability to transatlantic data flows and finalize our negotiation of the privacy shield enhancements. We must also deal with a pervasive narrative that is both incorrect and outdated, but that continues to pervade some of the public discourse. Not with the folks on this call, but there is this pervasive false narrative that the US government, privacy protections, transparency, and safeguards around government access to data are somehow less than EU member states. And that's objectively not the case, and yet it continues to color the EU-US relationship. One thing that I like to recall is that the UN Special Rapporteur for Privacy noted earlier this year in his final report on privacy protections in the United States that, quote, the United States is easily one of the top 10 or 20 countries in the world when it comes to the extent to which the right to privacy is protected in the realm of surveillance. This UN report also notes that the United States, quote, has more safeguards for privacy in matters of surveillance than the vast majority, say around 20 of the 27 EU member states. So I say that to put everything in context, that the focus on the fact that the US and EU have big things to discuss and big problems to solve together, ones that are based on real threats and real opportunities to collaborate and compete together. And in order to do that, we have to focus on these shared values that we have and set aside minor differences of approach, and we must move past outdated ways of dealing with each other. And with our increasingly data-driven economy, EU and US companies of all sizes and in all industries, not just tech giants, but SMEs and startups from every single sector, rely on the transfer of data across borders to innovate and compete in the global market. So as we work towards revitalizing this US-EU partnership, part of our rebuilding of transatlantic ties involves focusing on our many shared values than our differences. And we want to build on our rich shared history of bridging these differences, working together to protect our shared security and economic interests. And we can do all of that together. And the first step in moving forward with revitalizing the transatlantic relationship on technology, particularly, is to quickly conclude the Privacy Shield negotiations and restore certainty and predictability to EU-US data flows to the benefit of all of our citizens and businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. The ability to transfer data is a key enabler of our broader cooperation. So to make one last comment on that broader state of transatlantic technology cooperation, we do look forward to raising the level of ambition in US-EU collaboration in the digital space as a means to enrich innovation and progress around the world, to bolster a strong transatlantic research relationship, which has already been raised, and promote the development of technology that improves health outcomes and meets global challenges like climate change. So as we advance these shared priorities, we must ensure that minor differences in our approaches do not create barriers that hamper post-pandemic economic recovery, which is important to all of us. And we hope that our work together on trade and technology can reframe the discussion to emphasize these shared values that we have rather than our differences.
Thank you very much, Christopher Hoff, for your opening statement. And then I would like to hand over to you, Mr. Gencarelli. Do you share this overall optimism that in the end, you know, the US and Europe are natural partners, that we share a, you know, a set of values, and that also our fundamental understanding of the protection of privacy are, you know, sufficiently in accordance so that a consensus can be reached on that issue? Or do you maybe have some concerns? Where are, you know, maybe also the challenges and obstacles from your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much. They are indeed both they are both great opportunities and challenges. Otherwise, we wouldn't be discussing this issue today. First, thank you very much to you and to Atlantik-Brücke for the invitation. I also agree that this is something that goes much beyond the question of privacy and data flows in the digital economy. The EU and the US have a mutual interest that, as I said, go far beyond the question of data flows. Just to mention a few areas, from artificial intelligence to hate speech, illegal online content, and so on. But talking about coming back to data flows, with the risk of stating the obvious, I think we can only recognize and stress the importance of data flows. The pandemic has only further stressed that importance for the continuity of business operation, for the continuity of government operation, for and beyond that, for social interactions, for the event we are having today, and to which you have kindly invited me. The EU is firmly committed to international data flows, and we believe that the best way to further facilitate such flows is to work indeed to build on the basis of our common values, common principles, and safeguards. Developing strong privacy safeguards and promoting data, the free flow of data, are not opposite objectives, but complementary ones. And it is that approach which we follow and which is reflected in our ambitious agenda on facilitating trusted data transfers. For instance, we have recently concluded what we call adequacy negotiations with South Korea, 2 years after having concluded similar negotiations with Japan that created the biggest area of free and safe data flows in the world. Since 2018, data can flow freely without being subject to any additional requirements, safeguards, or complicated or sophisticated arrangement between Japan and the EU back and forth. As I said, this is something that we have just also concluded with Korea. We have, as you know, as part of the future relationship, or it's no longer future, of the new relationship with the UK, we are also intensively working on adequacy. We are also working on other transfer tools. At the end of this week, probably we will adopt our so-called modernized standard contractual clause. I can, of course, come back to that. This commitment to international data flows, this commitment to facilitating trusted data transfer, is also reflecting the approach we're taking in our international trade negotiations at both the bilateral and multilateral levels, such as the e-commerce negotiations in Geneva. For instance, I was mentioning the UK a few seconds ago. In the famous trade and cooperation agreement with the UK that we've concluded at the very end of last year, we included, and that's for the first time ever in an international trade agreement, we included a straightforward prohibition of data localization requirements and an emphasis on the importance of data flows. We want also to make very clear that genuine data protection on the one hand and digital protectionism on the other hand are two very different things. So as you can see, we are working with all our instruments, and we are trying to work with all our instruments in an increasingly synergetical way. Our data protection instruments, such as adequacy decisions, our trade instruments, trade agreements, but also we can also discuss that certain instruments in the area of investment control. Now, data flows and of course the focus of our discussion today, the transatlantic dimension of these issues. Again, maybe something very obvious to say, but of course, data flows are a very important part of the EU-US relationship. Just to give an example, there are 55% more data flows via transatlantic cables than over trans-Pacific routes. And of course, a large part of these flows are of personal data. And that's one of the reasons why I think on both sides of the Atlantic, developing a successor arrangement to the Privacy Shield is an absolute priority. And you have seen, including in joint statements by the leaders on both sides of the Atlantic, you have seen that this priority has been stressed, and has been translated into an intensification of the negotiation on a successor arrangement to the Privacy Shield. We will, I guess, all agree that a durable solution for EU and US data transfer is one that can deliver legal certainty to business and adequate protection to citizens. And the only way to achieve this is to develop a new arrangement that is fully compliant with the requirements of our Court of Justice, which is the highest court in Europe, which is our Supreme Court, the requirements set in the Schrems II judgment. And this is in the mutual interest of the EU and the US. Nobody wants to develop an arrangement which would not withstand political and legal scrutiny. And that's exactly on what we are working currently. They can clearly not be any shortcut or quick fix here. Those are complex issues that involve something which is sensitive and complex on both sides of the Atlantic, the balancing between, on the one hand, privacy and on the other hand, national security. Those are delicate issues because they involve constitutional requirements and for us, compliance with our Supreme Court on the way it has interpreted those constitutional requirements, as it would be for the US. Our constitutional requirements are clearly not open for negotiation. So nobody's here underestimating the complexity, and that's the challenge part of your question. But I believe that as like-minded partners, it should be possible to develop solutions on these issues. If really we are like-minded partners, and we believe that, I think on both sides of the Atlantic, it should be able to develop solutions on principles that are cherished both in Europe and in the US. Because which principles are we talking about when looking at this negotiation on a post-Schrems II Privacy Shield arrangement? Access to court, enforceable individual rights, limitation against excessive interference with privacy. I think that those are European and American values, and that's what makes me optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gencarelli. Now, I would like to push the two of you a little bit on that issue. I mean, Mrs. Plöger had just emphasized how concerned many European business leaders are, in particular here in Germany. There was actually a letter sent by industry leaders to the European Commission in which German business representatives have argued that legal uncertainty, and I quote, represents a very serious obstacle to further decisions on investment and economic activity. So they would even argue that, that harm has already been done and that there is, really a sense of urgency. So they need a solution. Many of our members, Atlantik-Brücke is a member institution of our corporate members, have also expressed this concern. So is that a long-term goal? I see on both sides of the Atlantic the willingness to cooperate, optimism, which is fantastic, but is that a long-term goal? Is that imminent? For how long do we have to wait? And what can companies who are faced with that still high degree of legal uncertainty do in the meantime if they store their customers' data, for example, in US-based cloud services? Many of these companies don't know what to do at the moment, and that really, as Ms. Plöger had emphasized, has an impact already on them being very careful on their investment decisions and so forth. So, for how long do we have to wait? How far has the discussion already progressed? Mr. Hoff?
Happy to start. I don't know. Chris, you want to start?
No, go right ahead.
No, I just want to of course, we share those concerns. We know the cost of legal uncertainty, the economic cost, also the chilling effect of legal uncertainty. And that's why we have worked on a number of solutions. We first have worked as the Commission, as the EU, on instruments that we can develop ourselves, that we don't need to negotiate. And that's why by the end of this week, you will have standard contract, modernized standard contractual clauses that offer a toolbox, that offer a checklist, amongst many other things, to assist companies with their compliance, in their compliance efforts, including with the Schrems II judgment. That's in particular important for small and medium companies that need, I would say, ready-made, off-the-shelf instrument, as they might not have often all the resources that are necessary to develop more sophisticated or ad hoc solutions. So that's a very concrete, I'm not saying that it will solve everything, but that's a very concrete and a very tangible contribution that we are making here.
I would, I agree that these are very, very complex issues, and that is why they have not been solved to date. There are also issues that everyone acknowledges, including Max Schrems, that these are issues for the governments to resolve. And we realize that companies are being put in this untenable position of having to make determinations about the adequacy of the United States laws or practices or every other third country. That's not particularly fair, and it's not easy and often not possible for companies to do that. Up until January 20th, I was a chief privacy officer at a private company in the US that has a multinational presence. So I'm well aware of the uncertainty that this has caused and the pain points that it causes for companies, truly. Which is why I'm part of this effort to, as quickly as we possibly can, resolve the issue while squarely and fully addressing the Schrems II ruling and judgment. It's important that we do that. Nobody wants to relive history. Nobody wants history to repeat itself over and over again. I also think it's important to acknowledge that businesses in Europe too are hurting still, and it continues to, the atmosphere continues to get worse. So it is imperative that we as governments solve that issue for our companies and for our citizens as quickly as possible while addressing fully the court decision. And that is an effort that we are, the statement in March from both sides, the joint statement that said we were intensifying negotiations wasn't just paper. We did, and we are, and we are in both technical and formal and every level of conversation every single week, both internally with the whole of government, the interagency on the United States side, and with the Commission. And it's also important for, we continue to call on the data protection authorities, the regulators, to not go down the path of uncoordinated enforcement actions while we're dealing with this, because it is only us who can deal with it, and we are doing it as quickly as possible, but they are complex issues.
So if we look at this kind of transitory period in which we find ourselves at the moment, if I may hand it back to you, Mr. Jetter, as a corporate leader, what do you think can be done? So some argue that, a way out of that dilemma for corporates is that companies could publicly disclose the scale of government data demands upon them. So transparency report, making their customers also aware of, demands upon them. Also, pseudonymization or encryption, or even data localization. So really, physically moving data back to the European continent. I take it that in your opening statement, you saw that critical. What would be your, what can companies do at the moment to regain trust and to maneuver through that period of uncertainty from your perspective?
Well, a couple points. First of all, I do not believe that we should take the time the two government representatives has laid out. I think we need a two-step approach. And let me be pragmatic. A company doing business from the US towards Europe, from Europe towards the United States, need a workable, a pragmatic solution. I would volunteer for a two-step approach, respecting the decision of the Supreme Court ruling the Schrems II. To resolve that in its entirety will take time. Everybody knows that. But small, medium-sized businesses, countries which are depending on export, they don't have that time. These companies need legal secured environments. So I would go with a two-step approach to define a minimum viable product, which would define I'm compliant. That allows companies on both sides of the Atlantic to operate in a frame of reference where they do understand what are the rules of the road, while we continue to negotiate and resolve the real hardcore issues of Schrems II. But I do think we can't wait until mid next year. The situation is getting worse. If somebody assumes that data traffic, data flows will become lower, I mean, that's a misassumption. And right on the back of data, we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about algorithms, we talk about machine learning. And from that perspective, what Europe exports has data in it. It lands in the United States. What the United States exports, whether it's cars, aircrafts, machinery, equipment, consumer goods, all have data in it. And more these data are personal data. So from that perspective, from my point of view as a business leader, can only argue we need a legal frame which allows the companies to conduct business on safe ground, while respecting there is a long-term issue which need to be addressed. So a short minimum viable product, so we can conduct business and trust emerges, and in a second step, really resolve the hardcore issues. And I would argue Schrems II has much more than only the data flow, because data are necessarily, you enrich data by using algorithms. We see this on the social platforms. Yeah, the knowledge you derive from that need to be addressed, the IP around it, and so on and so forth. So the topic data is just the incubation point of a much bigger discussion which need to happen. That's my humble opinion. Of course, what is very encouraging, everybody talked about data privacy enhancement, because I felt the data privacy shield was something good. Companies, irrespective of size, irrespective of origination, US or Europe, they knew what are the rules of the road. And that's what we need again. So if you speak about enhancements, that makes me a little bit feel more comfortable that we will be able to find the enhancement. But again, I think a pragmatic, a workable solution would be a two-step approach. By the way, we didn't talk about the TTC. I believe this must be one of the key topics of the TTC. And my last comment would be, maybe it would be helpful to dissect the issues. If you maybe pick a few industries, and you bring along to your discussions a few industry leaders, representatives of certain industries from the United States and from Europe. And maybe they can help in defining the requirements, and maybe they can help in defining what is needed and what is not needed, and gives you a better sense of what are the priorities from a business perspective. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jetter. Mrs. Plöger, I'm sure that many companies, German companies, approach you at the moment and ask for advice what to do. What would you tell them at the moment? You know, what is the pragmatic course at this very moment before we reach the consensus that we all long for?
Well, fortunately, I have to say I'm not the legal advisor to the companies, because that would put me into the awkward position. I leave that to the law firms. But as I said, we sometimes even see misleading advice in that field. I can only strongly plead, especially to the German data authorities, but also to the Commission to support us in this meantime, in this transitional period. I mean, we totally agree that there are heavy questions in space that need to be answered, but we need some solution for the meantime. And I love to hear that at the end of the week you will introduce some new standard clauses, because that, of course, contractual clauses will help. But also, I think we need a reluctant sanction regime. I mean, you know, we really have to lower the burden for the companies and say, we understand you're in a kind of a gray area at the moment. We try to support you, but we set out some sanctions, or at least lower them and the fines, because just to introduce and invite you to still stay in the cooperation with companies. I think that would really help. I mean, and we have to take into account that the companies have to cope with a lot of additional burden, not only due to the pandemic crisis, but also if you see the figures for cybersecurity attacks that have really risen in the last year. That is also something that makes companies refrain from digital transformation. And so we always put an extra burden on them, and I think it's our joint responsibility to lower the burden of data protection.
Unfortunately, we have already reached the end of today's call. We have covered a lot of ground and certainly realized how complex the issue is. We wish the two of you, Christoph Hoff and Bruno Gencarelli, the best of luck for your further discussions on that very complex issue. Of course, also best of luck to our two panelists, Martin Jetter and Iris Plöger. It was great to have you all. Thank you very much for a
Thank you very much.
And interesting discussion. But before we come to an end, I would like to hand over to Benjamin Brake, the Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs for IBM in the DACH region, our partner for today's event. Ben, thank you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of IBM, I would like to thank all participants for this important discussion. In terms of closing remarks, I would like to broaden the focus a bit. What we should keep in mind is that tech cooperation, as challenging as it might be, as we have seen during the discussion, might also be the nucleus for a much needed broader cooperation in the transatlantic region. To make this possible, digital companies shall act responsible, trustworthy, and also with a long-term focus. IBM brings much experience on data ethics, responsible data handling, and government access to data to this debate. Which is why we are looking forward to debating not only tech cooperation, but also its underlying legal dossiers here in the EU, such as the Data Markets Act and the Digital Services Act. That being said, I would like to close the debate on a positive and optimistic note. Thank you all.
Thank you very much and have a good day.